week 8 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few kickers I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Ka'im Fairbairn of the Houston Texans. So right now, this Texan team, they've been settling for a lot of field goals in the early going, coming off a bye week here. And they got a good matchup at the Carolina Panthers. That's a vulnerable defense and gives up a lot of points to teams on the season. So right now, Fairbairn available in 89% of fantasy leagues. In the last few weeks before the bye, week 4 versus Pittsburgh, 12 fantasy points. Week 5 at the Falcons, 15. And week 6 versus New Orleans with 8. So this season, 8 or more fantasy points in the first 6 games of the season here for Fairbairn. So right now, with this Texan team, I think will be in the red zone early and often in this game. I think, once again, 8-9 fantasy points is definitely a possibility for Fairbairn. And he's definitely a sleeper option this week at the position. Next kick is Graham Gano of the New York Giants. So Graham Gano, we've seen games out of him throughout his career where he'll hit some big 50-plus yarders. And some weeks he'll have great games, and some weeks he'll put in duds. And we've seen that the last 3 weeks. Week 5 in Miami, 13 fantasy points. Week 6 in Buffalo, 10. Week 7 versus the Commanders, 2. And this week here versus the New York Jet defense, that's bend but don't break. And one of the better defenses in the league. The Jets give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So right now, I think it's going to be a grinded-out type of ball game. Both teams with struggling quarterbacks and pretty bad offensive lines in general. And Graham Gano, like I said, he's good for every few games to hit a 50-plus yarder. He's available in 89% of fantasy leagues. It's a good matchup, and it's going to follow a game script where, like I said, both teams, I believe, are going to kick a decent amount of field goals. So if you need a kicker in deeper leagues, or if you had a Brett Maher or something like that, I think Graham Gano is a decent option this week. And the third and final kicker I have as a sleeper is Greg Joseph of the Minnesota Vikings. So Greg Joseph a few seasons ago was one of the better kickers in fantasy points in fantasy leagues. But the last 3 weeks, he's really getting it going for this Minnesota Viking team. And there's some drives they're not finishing, obviously. When you got a guy like Justin Jefferson not in the lineup, there's going to be drives that stall out where, in situations, if Jefferson was in the lineup, you finish the drives in the end zone, getting the football to him. But anyway, the last few weeks for Joseph, week 5 versus Kansas City, 9. Week 6 is Chicago, 11. And week 7 versus San Francisco, 12. So right now, 3 great games in a row at the kicker position. I know week 8, it's a little bit of a tougher kickers environment over there in Lambeau Field. But Greg Joseph's used to it, obviously, playing there once a season and playing this Packer team twice a season within the division. And him is well available in 89% of fantasy leagues, like Fairbairn and Graham Gano. So that's a few kickers I have as sleepers here for week 8 of the fantasy football season.